Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Focused Free Fit. We have a special guest today, Mr. Arnold Beekes. And I'm excited to have the conversation. We are going to be talking about our brains, at least a little bit today, I think. So instead of introducing Arnold, because I probably wouldn't do the best job, we'll let him tell us about himself. But as usual, we're also going to start with early life. So I'm really excited about this topic because it falls in line, in my opinion, a little bit with the health/fit part of what I like to do. And since we've talked many times about nutrition, I am interested in this topic of our brain, and hopefully he's going to help us navigate that path. So, Arnold, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I love to be your navigator.
I appreciate that. So as usual, we always like to ask our guests about their early life, how they grew up, where they grew up, and kind of see how your life went and what brought you to where you're at today before we get into the real meaty stuff. So if you're okay with that, love to have you tell us about where you started, where you grew up, and family life, and if that had an impact at all about where you are today. So please feel free. Let's go.
I grew up in the Netherlands, in a city called Amersfoort, which is in the middle of the country, in a family which, in hindsight, I would label as dysfunctional. So I'm now working in mental health, mental wellness. So it covers everything what you talk about, focused, free, fit. That was not the case in my family. My father was a military officer, and he was at home probably even worse than at his work. So he was extremely authoritarian, and that had an influence on everyone in the family. I had two younger siblings, a brother and a sister, and the mother, but everything was dominated by my father. That I think was, well, whether it's correlation or causation, I don't know, but had an impact on my sister, who much later in life got diagnosed with depression, but she had it already as a teenager. At some point in time, literally, my brother ran away, and my mother just distanced herself from what was happening. So that has a huge impact on all of us.
So you think, just to clarify, you believe, or it is the fact, I don't know, but your dad being around a lot had a big part to do with why your brother ran away and your sister got diagnosed with depression and your mom left.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And he was home a lot, and he caused a lot of what you guys were dealing with at home.
Yeah, so, well, he most of the time he even got home for lunch, and then but a little bit after 5 he was home. So he was very present. So it's not that he was on some kind of a, how do you call it in English, an operation abroad, and he
Okay.
was gone for 4 months.
He
Had an office job, and so he was more at home than most fathers are.
Would you say it was verbal abuse? Was it that he drank? Was it physical abuse? What was it that kind of caused, or a little bit of everything?
I would call it, I call it mental and emotional abuse, but he didn't recognize it. But it was very verbal. Yeah.
And what just so for everybody can get clarity, because I want people to be able to improve if they know of something that's happening like this. So what was it specifically? Was it just because everybody's verbal abuse is different, right? What I would put up with is different than somebody else. What was it? Bad language? Was it just that he was constantly, putting people down? What kind of verbal abuse are we talking?
He was constantly in a mode of command and control.
Okay.
Never asked your opinion. Never. I can recall once in my upbringing that he asked what I wanted. Once. Okay. And he was always criticizing whatever you did, whether it was your grades at school, or I played field hockey and I did something wrong, or I had to paint the house always. And then he looked at the end, oh, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good. Always non-stop criticizing.
Gotcha. Okay. So there was no accolade, no, hey, great job in school today. There was none of that. That never happened.
I had very recently a conversation with my sister, and I asked her and said, can you recall that our father gave me or you a compliment? And we both could not recall it. So
Gotcha.
you always had the feeling, and that's an essential part of what I'm doing now, that you're not good enough.
Gotcha. Okay. So that started from an early age, and that was affecting all of you, and you all dealt with it probably in different ways, which is why you
Absolutely.
all did different things. So walk me through how that ended, as you kept going on that path.
Well, it ended in me now working on helping people with their mental wellness and emotional wellness, which maybe, well, in an extreme part, I had the experience, but many people have a similar experience, not to that extreme, but in a similar kind of way. If I ask people, 99 out of 100 would say that they have the feeling that they're not good enough, because maybe it was not apparent, but look at the school system, the educational system. It's all focused on your mistakes. You didn't do that right. You didn't do that right. You didn't do that right. Yeah. Same when you start working with a boss. Yeah? Is when you have your job review, whatever, that was not good enough. That should improve. That's this, whatever. Yeah. It's always focused on what you didn't do right.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, and I asked the question wrong. So you're in your home. At what age? Let's start with this. At what age did you realize, what was the next phase after you were living at home with your dad and what was going on? What was that next phase like in your teen years and your early 20s?
Well, for
Where did
me,
you?
the next phase was when I was 18. I started studying in another city, and I started living in a room in that other city. So for me, that was my escape. So I loved it.
Gotcha. So that was your first chance or taste of things aren't like this for everybody. There is the point, it's different when you get outside your home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I gotcha. And so what did you think then? I mean, how did you start forming new opinions, and what did you expose yourself to when you moved out of the home, and how did you choose that?
Well, that's when I realized that my experience was kind of unique. Is a lot of people could not relate
Mm-hmm.
to my experience, and at the same time, I kind of started to flourish, because there was not a person who says 3 times a day what you did wrong. Yeah, so it's like I'm like,
Yep. It was like a release.
absolutely.
Okay. And then eventually, I'm guessing, how did you get led to what you do today?
Yeah, a couple of steps. Um, when I did very well at the university, which, well, was kind of strange, because from my upbringing, I always had the feeling, well, there's nothing good about me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and then I was successful. I'm like, I'm okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then I started working in the corporate environment, and the corporate environment, well, at least when I started, now it's still the same now, but it's like when I started, it's also kind of a command and control environment. Yeah? So for me, in dealing with it, it was very easy. It's very easy. You know, so, and
You
it
were prepared.
and people, I could still recall some colleagues where they said, well, Arnold, you dare to give some feedback to the main manager who was kind of a bully or whatever. And I'm like, he's not a bully. He's totally not as worse as my father. So I'm like,
Yeah.
So for me, it was really easy and simple, and I'm like, whatever, and I just do my thing, and people are like, yeah, how
Yep.
you do that? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Interesting.
that is why I was also very successful, also in the corporate world. Yeah, so I had basically every year a promotion and things like that. But it's again is like, oh, this life is easy.
Sure. Yeah. You were prepared in a way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in an odd way. So let me ask you before we get into what you're doing now and all of that. It seems like with the abuse, if you want to call it abuse, I guess it's fair to say it was abuse in some form. So after all that abuse, it seems like you made a transition fairly easy, meaning it doesn't mean you didn't have any trauma, but you were able to deal with it pretty easy. Would you say that's mostly not like that for most people, or is it something you were able to forget and just like get clean of, like clear your mind and clear your brain, or did it take a lot of work to overcome a lot of that trauma that you went through?
Well, that was mostly later on when I started my own business, because before that things were relatively easy for me as compared with my colleagues, because they were struggling with how things went, and I'm like, this is really easy.
Sure.
Um, so, but when I got out of the corporate environment, it took me, well, and I wouldn't say, well, the trauma obviously never leaves you, but it's still part of my system. Is that I'm totally addicted to learning. Is like, because I always want to improve. I always want to
Mhm.
improve, because it's really in my system that I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
Yeah. So to realize that is obviously already, well, the solution, and to deal with that and be conscious of that. But that took a long time.
So, so this is very interesting to me. So are you saying that you believe that your brain was wired, or your mind was wired from a very early on in the process from your dad, and it's probably never going to go away? You just have to learn how to deal with it. Do you
Yeah,
think that's the case?
yeah.
Okay. So what we're saying is at a very early age, I've heard that by 5 kids are who they are. So are you saying that it's too late to rewire? Like, I know you can fix, and we're going to talk about neuroplasticity and all these things, but is it something that you can change your hardwiring, or no? Once it's hardwired, it's there, and you just have to learn how to deal with it from in the right way.
You can change almost everything, but
Okay.
it's like, it's not a change itself, but it's how you respond to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's how you relate to things, rather than say, yeah, I feel lousy and frustrated, whatever. It's like, no, I know how to deal with it, and
Okay.
that makes it, well, pretty easy. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's something which you consciously have to apply. Yeah?
I got it. Okay. And I agree. It takes a lot of work, is what you're saying. It takes a lot of work and a lot of focus and intentionality to make sure you're doing the things you need to do.
Yeah, because the easy way is just like, oh, I cannot do that. I'm not good enough. Yeah, that's my upbringing. Blah 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 blah, blah. That creates an excuse.
Sure.
Huh?
And you let yourself off the hook time and time again.
Yeah, I'm doing the opposite.
Okay. So let's breach this topic by starting with mental illness. Um well, why don't you tell everybody what you do now? What is it exactly that you do? If you had to give us an elevator speed pitch, or whatever, a short description.
What I'm now doing is brain fitness. Well, everybody understands body fitness, that you need to exercise, you need to move. Well, doesn't mean you have to go to the gym. You can play badminton, you can walk your dog, you can bike, you can swim, whatever you want to keep your body busy. Why you're doing that? To maintain your strength, to be healthy, to feel good, all of those things. But I realized that for our brain, we basically do nothing. Not at the age of 5, but I say from the age of 20, 25, when people start working, they don't change their brain much, hardly anything. Of course you learn, but it's not really learning. It's like, oh, I had another course or another tool I need to learn or whatever. But it's not really learning and changing things inside. That is for most people very, very detrimental and not good, and creating all these mental illnesses and problems and addictions. Whereas I teach people is like, you can upgrade your brain. You don't need to be stuck to how you was when you left school or university or whatever. So my goal is to get people to understand, like, just like if you now ask people and say, do you do some exercise, movement, body fitness, whatever? Yeah, well, they do. And they all understand that necessary. It's my goal that people will say the same about brain fitness.
Mm-hmm. So I can relate to what you're saying about the 20-somethings. That was me. I got out of school, I got a job, and then you really typically just focus on your job, and then it's like social time. You just can't wait to get out of work, and you're doing whatever it is that's nonsense. I wasted a lot of time in my 20s, and probably mostly my 20s. So what should someone do if I was in college or just got out of college? What are the things I should be doing as soon as I get out of school? Because I have read multiple times that the human brain isn't fully developed until we're in our upper 20s. So if I get out of college and I'm 21, 22, I think I've got at least a couple years where my brain's not even fully developed. But what should I be doing to make sure that I am working my brain out? And what types of things are we talking about here?
Well, to more specify it to you, is like, you can change your brain until you die. So you can rewire, you can learn, you can grow until you die. So there is no limit. Yeah? Obviously, it goes less faster than when you're 10 to 12 or whatever, but it's like, it is ongoing. So it doesn't mean that, you got to hurry up because you got so many years left. No, you can change your brain the rest of your life. But if you don't change, if you never do something challenging, complex, interesting, then it will stay the same and it won't change. So it's your activity which determines how it will develop.
So, once I graduated school, in school, I feel like it was the wrong timing of life for me, but I wasn't interested. I just got through school to get through school. I didn't really want to be there. After I graduated, I had this thirst for knowledge kick in, and it was like a light bulb went off. I didn't care at all in school. And then I got out of school and I wanted to read as much as I could. And I've been that way ever since. So I love learning new things. And so for the person out there that doesn't do the learning outside of their job, right? Most people, they do their job. They're not even really excited to be there. And then they just want to check out when they get out of work. And that's probably, I think, what you were talking about in the earlier example. People should be spending time learning, challenging their brain, learning new things. How do you turn that on? If you're not interested and you just don't want to do it, how do you get people to do those challenges?
Well, you cannot force someone. It's got to be inside out, not outside in. But what I say to people, and that is a thing which everybody possesses, is follow your curiosity. Where are you
Interesting.
curious about? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And that is something which has been, suppressed with most kids, is that if you're curious, and the thing is where a kid asks 3 times why, and then the parents start to get angry because they don't have the answer. So it's like, so from a young age, or it's like if you ask at school, why is that? Just because I say so. Yeah. So from a young age, your curiosity is really suppressed.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean it's not there. So everybody is has an innate thing for curiosity. So that's why I say is don't look at money, don't look at status, don't look at, just follow your curiosity. And from that, I say curiosity, the flip side of curiosity is learning. Because if you're curious and you're interested and you like it, you start to learn.
Gotcha. Interesting. I love that. I love that saying. That's a way of saying it that no one uses. I like it. I like that. Have you ever heard of Daniel Amen?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm familiar with Daniel Amen and what he says to do for your brain. And he's done like, I think the most brain scans of anybody in the world. And so I'm familiar with that. He talks about a guy that I work with /for. He goes to Daniel Amen, and he's had scans, and he's talked with Daniel Amen and spent time with him. And so I'm curious to know, though, from a brain standpoint, what do you think people could do? So let's say I am interested and I'm following my curiosity. What else could I do? So if I'm going to challenge myself, I'm going to learn new things. How much time should I be allocating for this? And what else can I do? Because I think this kind of meshes, or I would say overlaps, with the health industry /space, because your brain, obviously health, that matters, but like food you eat and sleeping and exercise. And so what else can we do besides learning new things? What else do you think that people can do?
Well, the number one thing what I recommend people to do is to be kind to themselves.
And what do you mean by that? I'm thinking you mean self-talk. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Another way of calling self-talk is the inner critic. Yeah? Is that because of our upbringing and everything, which I mentioned earlier about the negative focus or whatever, as a kind of preventative measure, we have developed this inner critic. It's like, Arnold, that was not good enough. Arnold, you should do. Arnold, you should work harder. Arnold, you should do this. I did that in order to be prepared to confront my father. But many people, they're so critical about themselves. I'm not good. I should be doing this. I should be doing, like, everybody has that inner critic.
Yeah.
That is not helpful. So I say, and it takes effort. It takes exercise. Be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do this. Yeah?
Yep, that's right.
Hey, yeah. Hey, I did it. Yeah?
Yeah. So few people do that.
I just had a good conversation with Frank. Whoa.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Yeah?
But what if, okay, so there's a lot of people, to you and I, that seems pretty simple, right? But a lot of people, they just can't do that. How do they break that mold, that barrier? Do they be like, because how many thoughts do we have go through our brain in an hour? Isn't it like thousands of thoughts, like 70,000 a day
like
or something?
70, 80,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah. How do you fight? I mean, what? Okay, if you have 70 or 80,000, I'm going to guess 60 or negative 60,000 of the 70,000.
Well, then you're optimistic. Yeah, so it's So, but like with anything where you start in the beginning, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
When you did your first podcast show, it was not easy.
Yeah.
Now you look very comfortable. Yeah, so it's like with anything. It's like with biking, horse riding, playing golf, anything where speaking a different language.
Mm-hmm.
I speak English, but it's not my mother tongue.
Yeah.
So it's like with everything. In the beginning, it is challenging. It is hard. But just by continue doing it, and by practicing it and practicing everything, it will grow. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it just goes by itself. But there's nothing in your life, whether it's reading, writing, talking, biking, whatever, which you cannot do without effort. So what I'm saying to people is like, if they don't want to do that, their pain is not hard enough.
That's very true. So you have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say I am having negative thoughts. How do you, I think it's the awareness that you're doing it. I find that I tell people when I speak to individuals and I speak to them, I tell them that if I could change anything for them today, it would be, I actually say this, if I could change anything for you today, it would be to eliminate your negative self-talk. But I think it's tough for them to identify that they're doing it in the moment. It's because it happens so much for so much of your day, every day. How do you get them to be aware and self-aware that that's happening right then? And then what do they need to do to stop it and change it in the moment?
Well, number one, that takes practice. Number two, it takes something which I introduced with I call daily rituals. And daily rituals is for me a couple of list of questions where I start the day with. And those questions or reminders are things where I need to work on that day for myself. So it's not that I sleep, I start a new day, whatever, and immediately I'm like, oh, I got to do this at the work, and oh, there were problems with my wife yesterday, and no, those things are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be kind to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So those are really reminders, black on white on a piece of paper, or I have it. Well, I have it on my phone. Yeah. So it's like every morning. That's where I start with. That is also how I end the day. I got some different questions, but I review the day is like how I did that. Yeah. So it's a constant reminder because otherwise we're all creatures of habit. We forget it. We don't do it. So have those daily reminders. And it can even be a sticky note on your computer or whatever, but after 3 days you don't see it anymore. But have those daily rituals. That's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say, let me use an example which used with me. Actually, my first coach, and this is more than 20 years ago, I still recall we were in the office and he was a big guy, yeah, and he was making coffee for us. And then he had a jar with sugar in it, and he dropped it. So the sugar was all over the floor. Huh? The only thing the guy said was, I will clean that up later. And he sat down and started talking. Nothing hit him. And I was totally flabbergasted because I would have started swearing and like, holy shit, this is happening and this is happening and the sugar here
Yeah,
and I got to
for
clean it
sure.
up and whatever. And and the guy, he didn't even blink an eye. That was for me an example is like, so a few weeks later, I dropped something in the kitchen, let's say a bottle of ketchup or whatever, and it's all over the place. And I was starting to say, and then I realized, like, oh no, I shouldn't do that. That happened 3, 4, 5 times. And the 6th time, I don't start swearing.
So that was an example for you. That example was something that lived inside your head, and it was what you used to help yourself be aware. And that makes sense. Interesting. So I think it's interesting because, most people, they're going to have a tough time with that. But like you said, it's the intent. It's really difficult to do. It's simple, but it's not easy, is what I hear. It's simple, but not easy.
That is just, I started, well, I don't do it anymore. I started horse riding when I was in my 30s. I'd never done it as a kid. That is very hard. It's very difficult. It's even frightening, man, because you might be dropped off or whatever. But if you really want it, you got to go through that phase.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I can help you with nothing if you don't really want it. Yeah, that is your previous question was like, what should young kids do? Is like figure out what you really want and not what your friends say you have to want or your parents say you have to want or your grandfather says or whatever. It's like figure out, is this really what I want?
So I have a selfish question. And my selfish question is, I'm a dad of an 8-year-old. I'm a husband, and I'm a coach. And so a lot of these, I think about the different ways I could be better and I could do what you're recommending. But it always comes back to my son in the beginning because I'm like, okay, how can I be a better dad? Thinking about how your dad was. And so I've caught myself saying, because I said so, right? Because my son will say, hey, why? And it's like, hey, look, because I know it's for in his best interest. But I know I've done that, made that mistake. So what's a good way for a parent? Is it being patient and sitting down and saying, well, that's a great question. Why? And let me explain why I'm telling you to not jump on the bed or not do, whatever, not be on your iPad for this long or, so what is the process that we should go through for our kids, the parents out there that their kids are saying why?
We live in a duality. That means it's never just one thing, it's always both ends. It's light
Mm-hmm.
and dark.
Mm-hmm.
It's suffering and flourishing. Yeah, it's always both things. So I'm not by profession a parental advisor, but I
Yeah.
want to say this: is it's like, so one thing is to ask the question to the kid, and ask the kid is why do you think that being too long on your iPad is not good for you? So
I like it. Throw
for,
it back on the child.
yeah, force them to think, because if
Yeah.
they realize that, then you solve the problem.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I do that with people, but I don't do it with kids. So that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
The other thing I would like to say is that sometimes we have to be a little tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me give you an example which I had last week. I was in the supermarket. I was standing in line for the cashier. So it was kind of busy. So you had all the shopping carts in a line and whatever. And there were two in front of me and a bunch back of me. And then a lady came. She came just from the side, and she wanted to push herself in front of me. Yeah. So I looked at her like, what are you doing? Yeah. And then she started talking in Romanian, because that's where I live at the moment. I don't understand the shit what she says. So I said, it's like, if you want to ask me something, talk in English. Yeah? So she started talking English and said, my kid, which was 3, 4, I don't know, is losing her patience, and she will go totally crazy. She's losing her patience, and can I please go in front? What I would love to have said, but they're not too fond here about foreigners, and they love children, so I didn't say, but I would have loved said is then go back in line. That will teach your kid the patience which is needed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So she made a huge mistake as a parent, just, well, like, my child is losing a patience. Well, if you raise your child like that, if the moment it starts to go to the supermarket itself, it cannot stand in line.
Agreed.
So that's the balance between, sometimes you have to say, well, maybe that kid will be crying for the next 15 minutes. Well, let her cry for the 15 minutes, because she will learn that you have to wait until you pay. Yeah.
Yes. Agreed. I like the idea of asking the child the question back. I think that's the tough part about being a parent, right? You're a disciplinarian, and it's our job. And so you have to do it. You want your child to understand, but sometimes it's just not going to be the case. So it's
Yeah,
just
but
what it is.
children are smart. Children have brains. They can use it themselves as well. And in the beginning,
Agreed.
maybe they got used to, because they're used to you give always the answers. Yeah. But if you from a young age teach them that, most of the time they got the answers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good advice. Speaking of, you mentioned something called, I saw digital dementia. What do you mean when you say that?
Well, yeah, dementia with the elderly, hmm, which means I took care of my mother for the last 8 years of her life. where she had dementia and Parkinson and everything. Yeah. But so when I tell this to young people, they say, well, I'm not old or whatever. Yeah, but digital dementia is a state where you are anxious, depressed, lose your memory, you lose your focus, you cannot concentrate, and you're totally focused on instant gratification. That is happening because you're nonstop on your phone. That is digital dementia.
And do you have any recommendations as far as limits where people should maybe obviously spend less time on their devices and that kind of thing? But in this world, how, is there a limit or a prescribed limit?
Well, that is happening now in the world, and I don't believe that's going to work because, like in Australia, they said you're below 12, you're not. They put it in the law now that kids are not allowed to have that. I saw a reason. I think there's another country moving it. I don't think the solution is, again, ask the kid, and if you are, well, with the two things, you need to give your kid a phone as old as possible as they are.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been proven that the younger, let's say, I see kids of 6 with a phone, whatever, is like that has later on a huge probability that they will get mental illness. Yeah? But if you suppose you're 13, 14, 15, ask them, what do you think that does with your concentration? That was to do with your writing. That was to do with your reading, whatever. Again, ask. Nobody, whether you're very young or you're very old or you're like Frank, nobody likes to be told what to do. What I say, force people to think for themselves. It's like, hey, what do you think that does for your memory? If you only, or for 10 hours a day, only watch maximum 2-minute TikTok video, what do you think that will do for your recollection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If they come themselves to the conclusion, you don't need to do anything.
Gotcha. So, talk to me about what you think are the most important things that people should take away from how to have a healthy brain and keep a healthy brain over their life. What are the things you would say if there was a top 5 or a list of 5 or, some 10 things people should be focused on that you want them to take away from this? And then we'll talk about where they can find you. But I want to make sure they get value out of this. So what would you say that people need to start focusing on doing to make sure that they have the best brain possible?
I will combine 3 points, what I call basics, and 3 principles, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
The basics I already started with number 1, and number 1 is be kind to yourself.
Okay.
Number 2, help other people. That is the best thing you can do for your brain.
That's interesting.
Number 3, in a difficult brain, it means diverge and converge. Diverge means follow your curiosity, just study why has some snails a home on their back and other snails not. Huh? Just follow your curiosity. That's diverse. Yeah, you go in all directions. It doesn't matter. Huh? Converse means out of everything you studied, whatever, create something. Bring it more together. Yeah. So 3 basics: be kind to yourself, help others, diverse and converge. 3 principles, they are kind of governing that, is number 1, take back your power. We have given our power away to parents, teachers, bosses, spouses, friends, social media.
I take that as one of my practices is when I open my eyes in the morning is just the first thing is always gratitude, being grateful for, and that I kind of take that as kind of that a little bit, which I love. Yes. 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 I love it. This has been great. I really appreciate the time that you've helped us, break this down. So where can people find you if they want to reach out or they want to find out more about you? Where should they go? Gotcha. Love it. We'll put all of that in our show notes as well. Um, I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. I love your follow your curiosity. That's my big takeaway. Follow your curiosity. I love that. Yes, yes. I gotta change. I gotta get together in the dad department. But I appreciate it. And look, maybe we'll have to have a follow up in the future. So thank you, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Until next time, bye bye, everybody.